Hello, friends. Welcome to our weekly Shanti and Place gathering. We're so happy that you could join us. We'll begin in just a few moments as folks are making their way from the waiting room into our gathering. We're also streaming live. You're welcome to keep your cameras on or off as you feel comfortable, but we do ask that you just take a moment to make sure that you are muted out. Let's take a comfortable position, whether we're sitting on chairs or on the ground, whatever works for you. But a helpful indicator is to try to make sure that our spines are as erect and straight and engaged as possible while still being comfortable. If we haven't already done so, we can close the eyes or soften the gaze now. We'll begin our meditation as we generally do, taking 3 deep breaths in and out together to help focus us, to help center us, to help to bring us to a place of setting our intention for our practice together. We'll breathe in through the nose for about 4 counts. We'll hold the breath for about 4 counts. And then we'll release the breath either through the nose or softly between the lips for a slightly longer duration, perhaps 6 counts. If that feels natural and accessible to you, you're welcome to follow along using those counts. If something else feels a little bit more natural for you, feel free to adjust. Breathing in deeply through the nose. 2, 3, 4. Holding. 2, 3, 4. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Second time, breathing in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One final deep breath in. Hold. Out. Continuing to breathe, continuing to notice the breath. We can stay with this rhythm if it feels right to us, or allow the breath to find its own natural rhythm, its own pace. Giving ourselves the gift of time and presence, allowing ourselves what we need to settle into this moment. So often we come into a meditation practice or any activity with expectation, with a plan. Being present and being an observer means accepting this moment for exactly what it is. But when we hold on to that expectation, we experience this moment only in comparison to what we expected it to be. Perhaps taking a moment here to recognize and name whatever expectations we've carried with us. And perhaps allowing ourselves to let them go. If we'd like to here, we can take another deep breath in and this time exhale loudly through the mouth, keeping ourselves on mute. We can be as loud as we want to. We can exaggerate that exhalation, that process of letting go, breathing in the awareness of this moment and sighing out the burden of expectation that we carry. Breathing in through the nose and sighing out. We might feel a little silly doing that. It might even bring a smile to our lips. And we can just remind ourselves that there's no need to judge ourselves and there's no one there to judge us. And if it sounds silly, all the better. It's even sillier to hold on to the expectations, so why not just sigh them out? Continuing to notice the breath. This breath is our anchor, our foundation, a resting place for our awareness. Continuing to notice the breath. And perhaps now also turning the awareness to the mind. Asking with curiosity, where is my mind? Perhaps trying to locate it the way a parent might search for their child in a crowded, bustling room. Where is my mind? Finding the mind, the thoughts that are jumping, that are moving. gently bringing it back. Just like that parent that finds that child and takes her by the hand and walks her back. Assuring ourselves, perhaps, that there will be plenty of time for the mind to think about whatever it wants to think about, to plan, to scheme, to dream. But in this moment, in this blessed moment, all we have to do is observe and be. Reminding ourselves that this moment is exactly where we are meant to be. When we remind ourselves, it's just that. It's resetting the mind. It's bringing the mind back. Bringing the mind back to that flow of breath, to the simple, beautiful reality of this moment. As we now approach the end of our meditation sit together, perhaps setting or resetting our intention, not just for this sit, but perhaps if we'd like for the rest of the day or even the rest of the week, to be a little bit freer of expectation, to lean in a little bit more intentionally to presence. We'll close our meditation with one final deep breath in and the hearing or chanting of the sacred syllable Om as we breathe out and let go. Breathing in deeply through the nose. with gentleness and ease, we can blink the eyes open, perhaps warm our palms and open our closed eyes into our hands, bringing our awareness back to our surroundings, to our room, to our gathering. So thank you so much, friends, for joining us for our meditation. We'll have a short Dharma teaching now. And building on a conversation that we had last week, where we looked at distractions and how distractions and challenges, things that are unexpected, can, if we choose to see them in this light, can be blessings and opportunities to replace our tendency to judge with genuine curiosity, with genuine acceptance for whatever is meant to be in this moment beyond our control. And so today I'd like to build on that and discuss a little bit around the idea of letting go of expectation, letting go of the desire or the need to control, to manage, to talk about what happens when we shift our focus from the action itself to a deeper understanding of the intention behind the action, the motivation for the action, and the consciousness in which we perform the action. Yoga philosophy speaks about this generally using language around attachment and non-attachment, sometimes also translated as detachment. But because in our cultural context, detachment can have some other connotations, which is not really what yoga philosophy is referring to, many find the term non-attachment a little bit more accessible. So we'll use the term non-attachment. Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita speaks about non-attachment quite a bit, and there's two verses or shlokas that I wanted to look at today, where Krishna speaks more specifically about non-attachment as the key for the way that the yogi engages with the world and accepts the challenges, the opportunities, the things beyond our control that we encounter in the world. We all have to deal with things that are beyond our control, and yet we all have, practically speaking, almost complete control in terms of how we can choose to see those things and respond to those things rather than react to those things. So Krishna says, Kayena manasa buddhya kevaler indriyarapi yogina karma kurvanti Sangam Tyaktvä shuddhaye. He tells Arjuna the yogis act with non-attachment, engaging body, mind, disciplined intellect or discerning intellect, and even their very senses, all for the sole purpose of Atma Shuddhaya, of self-purification. In other words, of growth, of self-improvement, of coming more and more to that space of acting from the platform of awareness and selflessness rather than ego and selfishness. And then Krishna, actually this is the previous verse, so I've got them a little bit out of order, but Krishna offers a beautiful analogy for how we can understand this. He says, Brahmanyadhaya karmani sangam tyakta karoti yah lipyatena sapapena padmapatram ivambhasa. One who acts in non-attachment, he says, offering all action to the divine, Brahman, remains untouched by misfortune, just as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. This is a really beautiful analogy. I don't know how many of us have seen a lotus leaf. This is an image of a lotus leaf that I found online. But if you've ever seen or had experience with a lotus leaf, it has this really amazing quality that it's known for. Of course, lotuses grow in water and often in muddy water and swampy water. So the lotus leaf is, practically speaking, it comes into contact with water and moisture. It's practically submerged in water. And yet the lotus leaf has this very, very interesting quality where, because of a waxy coating on the top of the leaf, or that covers the leaf, the drops of water, they come in contact with the leaf, but they can't penetrate the leaf, and so they're easily wicked off. In fact, I think one of these like athletic clothing companies, it may have been Nike. Apparently, something I read indicates that they studied the way the lotus leaf is able to have the water wick off of it to develop this technology of clothing especially for like runners, where it's able to keep you very dry because the moisture is like wicked off. So this is the quality of a lotus leaf. So why does Krishna give this example in the Gita? Krishna seems to be suggesting that if we can shift our paradigm, if we can shift from a paradigm of expectation and attachment. If we think about expectation, it's so much tied to attachment. We have a certain picture, we create a certain picture for ourselves of the way something should be, or of something that we want, or of something that was. Whatever it is, we create this kind of mental picture, and then we sell ourselves on it. And we experience frustration or disappointment or lamentation or anxiety when our reality doesn't quite line up to that picture, isn't it? So if we can shift away from that tendency, and if instead we can move more and more to this place of acceptance, this place of acting in, as we'll talk about in a moment, with the right intention, with the right motivation, in the right consciousness. If we can do that, then like the lotus leaf, we can experience things. It's not that Krishna is suggesting that we all run away from the world and hide in a cave, or lock ourselves up in a cloistered monastery or something. For very few of us, maybe we will truly be called to such extreme renunciation from the world. But for most of us, Krishna advises, like the lotus leaf, let us be in the world, but not of it. In other words, let us engage fully, but keep our consciousness free from attachment and expectation and the frustrations that come with it. Let us maintain this perspective of the yogi even as we act in so many ways in the world and engage in so many ways. So this phrase, Sangam Tyaktvä, Sangam Tyaktvä, is the phrase that Krishna uses in these verses that we can loosely translate as non-attachment. And the great teachers of the Gita and other texts like it explain that this non-attachment is about, it's not simply about rejecting things or taking a step back from the world or from relationships or engagement. This Sangam Tyaktvä is about cultivating right intention, right motivation, and right consciousness. When we widen our perspective to let go of expectations of the way things should be, and we start to open ourselves to the possibility of seeing everything for what it is, then we're able to tune into anything and everything that comes our way as an opportunity for growth. And as Krishna says in this verse, for self-purification. How amazing if we could choose to see everything that happens, even and especially those things that we didn't plan for, that we didn't ask for, that perhaps are posing challenges or throwing kind of a wrench in our plan, so to speak. If we can see that, how amazing if we could see that as an opportunity for our self-purification, as the universe or the divine, as some higher plan for me to learn and grow in the way that I'm meant to. And a connected idea is right motivation. If we have this right intention, if we're trying to cultivate and aspiring towards this understanding, then we can perform an action, whatever the action may be, that is needed, that is necessary, and that is kind, irrespective of who gets credit for it, irrespective of rewards, irrespective of whether we're seen for it. So much these days has become a matter of broadcasting and sharing it, especially through social media. But this idea of non-attachment invites us to think about motivation for our actions without attachment to or concern for who sees it, without getting credit for it, without getting likes or follows or recognition. And in a similar way, ultimately, Sangam Tyaktvä is aiming towards a space of right consciousness. If we can see ourselves not as the be-all, end-all doers of our actions, but as instruments, as caretakers, as custodians. I love in one of the verses that I cited, I love that Krishna specifies we can use our bodies, our minds, our words, our thoughts, our intellect and discernment. We can use all of that because we recognize that none of that actually belongs to me. All of that, everything I have, whatever abilities I may have in terms of my body, in terms of my mind, in terms of my senses, in terms of my intellect, anything that I have is actually a gift that's been given to me. And if I see it in that way, then not only do I experience gratitude, but I experience a sense of responsibility that let me use these precious gifts that have been given to me in the best way to uplift and serve others, to be an instrument of care and compassion or justice, to be a caretaker of the world around me, to be a custodian. We can also be in this right consciousness also helps us to be honest about our limitations and to relinquish control. So often we exist in the space of wanting to control precisely that which we have little to no control over, and we experience frustration after frustration. But if we can learn to recognize our limitations, even to embrace our limitations, and relinquish control over that which we never really had control over to begin with, then we move more into this space of acceptance and at the same time of practicing responsibility for that which is within my control. And that brings us to the final aspect of right consciousness, that it helps us to move from ego-driven selfishness to ego-effacing selflessness. Again, in that spirit of self-purification, where more and more can my actions be a reflection of giving and caring and serving rather than building up my own ego? Can I more and more move into that space of selflessness, of seeing the bigger picture, of honoring those and that which is beyond me? Sangam Tyaktvä, or non-attachment, is often misunderstood. And so here I just want to take a moment or two to point out that when we talk about this mode of non-attachment, we're not talking about apathy. This is not what Krishna is getting at in the Gita or what yoga philosophy is aiming at, right? It's not that the non-attached yogi is simply apathetic or non-caring. It's actually quite the opposite. The non-attached yogi, again, recognizes that this is an opportunity to be an instrument of care, to be the best caretaker, the best custodian, the best instrument that I possibly can. Nor is non-attachment haphazard or lackluster action. It's not saying that the action doesn't matter. It's saying that beyond the action itself, what will determine the ultimate purpose and meaning of that action is the intention and consciousness with which I perform the action. So let me be that much more vigilant and caring. So it's not haphazardness or sort of half-hearted action. It's very intentional execution of action, but also understanding, or I should say, and also understanding that the foundation upon which that action rests is right consciousness, right intention, right motivation. Non-attachment is not repressing emotions or denying emotions or what's sometimes referred to as spiritual bypassing. This is not a way to avoid feeling with and dealing with what we need to feel and deal with, or it's not an excuse to rob others of the opportunity to feel and experience their emotions. Rather, it is an opportunity to rise above our tendencies to default to having our emotions and feelings control us. It's an invitation to recognize those emotions and with gentleness and self-care and with intention to guide our feelings, our thoughts, our actions back to that place of alignment with our intention, with our motivation, with our consciousness. So this is an invitation to put this idea of non-attachment or Sangam Tyaktvä into practice. You may have seen this before. We may have talked about this before as well. Where so often we exist in this world of that which is beyond our circle of influence or our sphere of influence. And as a result of that, we have a reactive focus, we invite negative energy, and it actually ends up kind of having this counterproductive effect of shrinking our sphere of influence, shrinking that which we have control over. We often feel like we're out of control. But if we can practice non-attachment, what we start to do is we start to intentionally focus on that which is within our sphere of influence, which again is generally how we respond to situations. It's what we bring, it's how we show up. The more time we're spending in that sphere, the more we're growing that sphere, growing that circle of influence, so that more and more in a healthy way, we're able to address wider and wider circles of concern. Not because we're trying to manage that which is beyond our control, not because we are so tied into a certain expectation or certain desire, but rather because we are focusing on what is within our circle of influence, because we're focusing on that which we truly do have control over, and we are putting that energy into responding with clarity, responding with non-attachment, that enlarges our circle of influence, that increases our ability to respond effectively to the world around us. So it's an invitation to really take stock of what is within our circle of influence, what is within our circle of concern, and how can we more intentionally practice non-attachment to widen our circle of influence and to operate from that platform, like that wonderful lotus leaf that Krishna spoke about. So I'll close there. And we'll open it up to any questions, comments, reflections, anything anyone would like to share. Thank you. Some messages coming in to me privately and through the chat box. So I always appreciate words of affirmation. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. This is such a precious opportunity just to reflect on these things, wherever we are in our practice, whether this is newer to us or whether this is something that we've heard before or is already a part of our practice and our study. It's always nice, especially in the company of others, even virtually, to reflect on how we can put this more into our practice.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So on the concept of non-attachment and to be accepting on what it comes our way, in order for us to be able to live our lives, we would have to have an intention and have an attachment to improve ourselves. And so you put your hopes and expectations on getting better. So if you don't reach or you don't succeed, you in a way are attached. What you are saying is we should accept that as is what it's supposed to be. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say? I think it's impossible to really, impossible, very difficult to be non-attached, attached to your own will of improvement.
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful point and a really important question there. My understanding, although I'm happy to hear from others as well, my understanding is that when we speak about non-attachment, it's not so much, right? Attachment, as you said, Paz, attachment is it's natural. And it's as long as we're embodied beings, we'll never truly be free of attachment. If by attachment we mean some desire, some hope, even expectation that we spoke about. So the idea with non-attachment is not that we completely free ourselves from any kind of sense of expectation or desire or hope, but that we rechannel, we reorient that. So there's expectation in the sense of things should happen this way, right? And we can take that expectation and go into a place of even entitlement. So things should happen this way, and when they don't, then I become angry, I become upset, I become frustrated, I blame others, or I become depressed and experience despair. But we can take that same tendency towards expectation and we can replace it or substitute it with hope, with a genuine desire and even enthusiasm for self-improvement. And just as we were talking about last week, we can replace that tendency to judge, right? Because expectation and attachment are so tied into judgment as well, right? Usually, what are we judging when we judge something or someone or even ourselves? It's because very sort of subtly or subliminally, we're holding the reality, we're holding the expectation, and we're making a comparison. In one sense, that's all judgment is. It's a comparison between something as it is and then something as we imagined it or want it to be or whatever, right? What if we could try to replace that? We can't kind of get rid of that tendency altogether, but what if we tried to replace that tendency to judge with, as we were talking about last week, with curiosity? We're still recognizing, it's not that we're just pretending that the expectation is not there, but we're recognizing and we're moving more into a space of, okay, I had this expectation. This is what's going on. What can I use to bridge the gap? That's an invitation for curiosity, or even in terms of our own self-improvement. Okay, this is what I hope for myself. Doesn't quite seem to be happening. I'm running into these challenges. Okay, what's going on there? What am I meant to learn in this moment? Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Oh, I see a question in the chat box. How does the lotus leaf weather a fast flow water force. That is when life is too overwhelming. Yeah. So the example of the lotus leaf, the principle behind it is to engage and yet not to be, Krishna says in the Gita, lipyate, not to be affected in the way of brought down by it. But sometimes there are those situations in our life where there's such a flow of water, there's so much that's overwhelming us that it can feel very much like, even with the sort of the best of intentions, we still feel like we can be swept away. So I think the more we're practicing this spirit of non-attachment, the more that in those challenging situations we can kind of activate it. We can build. We can act from that place of muscle memory, right? That non-attachment, right? In the heat of the moment, we'll not perhaps be able to mentally, intellectually, or even intentionally kind of practice that non-attachment or call up that non-attachment. But the idea is, if we are making that a regular part of our practice, then it's almost like it helps us to reset our default settings, so that when and if those challenges come, as difficult as it might be, that spirit of non-attachment, spirit of right intention, right consciousness, right motivation, all of that will come to the surface. So in one sense, we can never fully, prepare for or plan for what happens in those moments of a raging flow of water, but we can try to strengthen ourselves to the best of our ability through our practice. But the other thing, and I know we're mixing the metaphors a little bit, but the other thing that strikes me in this example is, the way the lotus leaf works, it wicks off the water. It doesn't fight against or resist it. It allows itself to be present in the water, and the water doesn't penetrate through it. And so in the same way, even if, and we're mixing the metaphor a little bit, but even when that flow of water comes, we can fight against the current. And there's a saying that what we resist persists. So when we fight against a current, often the very thing that we're fighting against, we're like kind of giving it more power against us. So if we see this flow, this onslaught of something that's overwhelming and stressful, and we fight against it, then in one sense, we're putting more energy to it, and we can actually end up weakening ourselves. But if in moments like that, if we can figure out a way to, as I say, go with the flow, then imagine that lotus leaf, it's carried by that strong flow of water, and yet still, because of its nature, it's still not, drowned out or destroyed by it. So it's in contact with even a strong flow of water, but still, if we were to see that leaf and feel that leaf, it would still be able to wick all that water off. So in a similar way, perhaps the lesson here is not to resist and push against, but to be present to go with the flow, and yet to also maintain this perspective that allows us to shake off rather than to be submerged in, and to have those influences, kind of penetrate into us and affect us on that deeper level. I hope that's helpful, Soumya. And with that, I think we'll bring our gathering to a close for this week. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to spend this time with you each week. And please join us next week for our next installment. Hope to see you then. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much.
You too. Bye.